Welcome aboard the Athletics Can't Wait Jets podcast, your nonstop shop for all things Jets with Tim McMaster, Zack Rosenblatt, and Marissa Dunn.
Can't wait.
We said we were taking the week off, but you knew the New York Jets weren't going to allow us to do that. Breaking news edition of the Can't Wait podcast. Nathaniel Hackett is the new offensive coordinator of the Jets. I'm Tim McMaster, along with Zack Rosenblatt, our Jets reporter at The Athletic, and also Marissa Dunn, our producer. And we're, as always, late. So while we were waiting for Marissa this time, I was going through the chat on YouTube to just kind of see what people were angry about besides Nathaniel Hackett. And
which I can't see your comments, by the way, right now. So you guys can make fun of me all you want, and I won't see it.
So you're only going to get to Zack what we pass along. But one thing was assuming that we were late because of Zack, somebody commented, Zack is officially the new Connor. And then someone else commented, except with iced coffee,
yes.
Which brings us to, before we get to Nathaniel Hackett, Zack, you got a good iced coffee story?
I do. It all ties together. So during the off season, I like to just post up at coffee shops and get work done, which I was on my way to a coffee shop to get work done today. One that I hadn't been to before, but I heard was good in Jersey City. And so the news comes literally as I pull up to park, like outside of the coffee shop. I'm like, all right, I'll just go in and post up in there. So, you need a little bit of workspace. And I go in, it's like a very tiny coffee shop. The coffee was great. But so I got a nice coffee thinking I would be sitting inside drinking it. And then I realized there's no seating in there. So I'm like, can I go sit in your guys' patio in the back? They're like, sure. So they go through this whole thing. They take out all the keys, unlock, do it, unlock the door. They open it. I go sit out back. I realize that it's also completely outdoors in the back. So because I'm too embarrassed to like immediately like pull back, I go and sit out there for like 10 minutes trying to write. I'm like shivering. It's like windy.
Nathaniel Hackett.
Yeah. So it was
the
a
lead
struggle
of your
for me.
Story was written.
It was all a bunch of just random letters mixed in. Yeah. But yeah, so the things I go through just to drink iced coffee for you guys. I just wanted to let you know.
That is like when news just,
it's always the worst
you're gonna have a
times,
nice easy day, and
yeah.
I thought I was gonna get a haircut in peace this afternoon, and
Then you're
I
rushing.
did predict, Zack, that it was going to be a while. I think that was the quote. It's going to be a while.
We talk about why I thought that too, but yeah.
So let's jump into it. And that's where we'll start. We'll start with the search because, and I should say, besides Nathaniel Hackett, they also have a new offensive line coach in Keith Carter, and we're going to touch on him as well. But obviously, Hackett is the main hire here. They interviewed at least 10 people for this job, from what you've reported. Just talk about how this kind of search went, because he was one of the first guys, as far as I know, and how it kind of came full circle back to Hackett.
Yeah. So Robert Saleh said is that they did, what did he say? He said well over 15, which, is
okay.
Well over too. So I don't know. It's a
17.
funny way of saying that. And, what I'd heard throughout the process is, which I've talked about on here and in stories that I've written, is that they were having a hard time with convincing some coordinators that this was a job that they would even be at for more than a year. They've been battling the no quarterback. Saleh even admitted that was like the number one concern he was getting from candidates, and the prospect of, job security and not having it. So you saw some people turn them down. I know Joe Brady decided he didn't want to even interview. Darrell Bevell didn't, and Bill Callahan didn't. Like, those are three pretty big names that they tried to talk to, and they didn't want to talk. And I imagine that was all part of it. And I think there were others that were unnamed that maybe like expressed concerns and stuff like that. But, ultimately he talked to Hackett early, and then again, like a few of the candidates he talked to via Zoom, all of them via Zoom initially. And then there were some that he brought in person to the facility. Hackett was one of those. And what I had heard as recently as this week is that people, even like within the Jets building, while they liked him as a candidate, I think a lot of people are in the impression, both in the building and outside of the building, that Hackett was not ready to get back into coaching. Because, you look at what happened in Denver, that was one of the more, every year there's like a glorious disaster with a coach. And he was like this year's, disaster. He was fired after 15 games because, by the end, there dudes like fighting on the sideline on his own team. And, I don't know all the exact, our Broncos writer does a great job. I don't know all the, Nick Kosmider. I don't know if I said his last name right. But Kosmider, yeah. Yeah, so I don't know like all the details of why everything went wrong. I imagine Russell Wilson had a lot to do with it, and he's pretty demanding of the things that he wants and all that stuff. But anyway, so Hackett became like a laughing stock of the league. Everybody's making fun of him every week. He had to give up. He gave up play calling. They had to bring in a game management coach, and he kind of became like the punchline of the league. And so I think there was a part of him that was hesitant to come back into coaching. And Saleh and him have a past relationship, and and something Saleh said to him convinced him to do this. He's going to be getting paid by the Broncos for the next 4 years. Like, this is not a money-based thing. Obviously, he's going to be making less for the Jets than he would for the Broncos. Like, just sit at home and do nothing. So I think that's all interesting, and I think it comes back to what is going to be the biggest takeaway everybody's had from all of this is if he's doing that, if he's eschewing all that money that he could just be making to not work, you'd think he's doing it with the knowledge that if not Aaron Rodgers coming here, he's at least confident that they're going to get a very good quarterback. And he has a very close relationship with Aaron Rodgers. It's well documented. Rodgers talked about it publicly. And so I don't know. I think, I've texted you guys about the whole Aaron Rodgers thing. I was hesitant to believe that it was a possibility because I didn't see a reason why he would think that the Jets were like a good fit for him. And then they hire like his best buddy in the coaching business. And now all of a sudden I've flipped completely. And now I'm really wondering if they wind up getting him. I don't think it's a lock by any stretch. I think need to pump the brakes a little bit, just assuming it's going to happen. He doesn't have a no trade clause. The Packers have to agree to trade him somewhere. He has to say that he wants to leave the Packers. He has to say he's not retiring. Like, there's a lot of steps between now and like Rodgers coming. I know I'm skipping a few points, but the point being they got Hackett here, I imagine in part because he was confident they were going to have a quarterback that he could work with.
Well, and time-wise too, right? The one thing that's interesting about this quarterback scenario, right, is that Carr can be had right after the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But it sounds like if you want Aaron Rodgers, you got to wait till June, right? As far as like contract and what it will mean financially for the Packers. They probably don't want to sign him or don't want to trade him until a certain time. So like there's kind of a risk there, right? Like, do we want to get this done and know what we have, or do we want to kind of wait out Aaron Rodgers? And then if you can't get Aaron Rodgers, then what?
Yeah. And that's kind of been my biggest question for this whole process, and why I think I've leaned more towards Derek Carr, because you can go and even if you don't trade for him, even if he's not traded, which he might not be because of the way his contract is structured and the guarantees and all that stuff, like you can sign him before any of these other guys because he's going to become available when they cut him. And I think there's some appeal to doing that as opposed to waiting and risking not getting anybody. And I think they're well aware of all that of the time. Bringing Hackett in, maybe they're pretty confident that they can reel Rodgers in, but the fact that Rodgers hasn't announced anything, I think, is pretty telling. Like nobody really knows what he's thinking. So, it is early. So, it's only January 26th. The Super Bowl is not for a few weeks. So there is a little bit of time where you can kind of like gauge what's going on. You hope that maybe Rodgers decides what he's doing within the next couple of weeks. You'd think he would, for the sake of even the Packers, if he wants to go back there or whatever team he wants to go to, in order for them to operate this offseason, they need to know that, like, all right, we're bringing in Aaron Rodgers, and now we need to focus on the offensive line and this, that, and this and that. And so, yeah, there's risk waiting. I don't know if they necessarily. I think Rodgers would probably a post June 1 designation. I think I need to look up like the language of that. If they might be able to like agree to it, but they don't like officially announce it till later or something. It might be something like along those lines. But
here's something that I was going to ask, and it's in the chat, so I'm just going to throw it up here for you. But is it tampering? And tampering in the NFL, it's not like we have a podcast on our NBA feed called Tampering. It's such a big deal in the NBA, right? It's a little different in the NFL, but is it tampering if Hackett was talking to Rodgers before coming to the Jets? I would say no, right? Because he wasn't an employee of the Jets. But if he talked to Rodgers today, it probably would be, right? Like, I don't know.
It's a very good question.
And then there was also Matt Stafford, like on vacation and with McVay, right? Like they were together in Cabo. That's how that trade all went down, right?
Yeah.
Like
that's right. Yeah, that's the thing. I need to look. I'll look up the letter of the law maybe after we get off here. And I imagine you're probably okay to talk to anybody as long as you're not saying like, come sign with me, maybe like, and I guess you would have to be able to prove that. And also, I feel like Hackett could probably have talked to him while he was unemployed. I mean, why wouldn't he have been able to? He wasn't employed.
Then you're just friends.
But maybe like not like if he had already had a handshake agreement with the Jets and he's like talking on behalf of the Jets, like that's where it gets like dicey. Like, I don't know. I think they'd be okay. Honestly, the back dealings and conversations happen, which a lot of them are probably illegal, to be honest. Like there's definitely like coaches and agents and players and people who are associated with a player talking to, a team. I'm not saying the Jets did this or anything. I'm just saying like that definitely happens where teams trying to get like a feel for certain guys and, would you be interested in coming here? Or, say like, a player on the Jets is friends with a player on another team and they're like, so what's so-and-so thinking? And then they find out that like all of that's happening. There's not really any way of, penalizing it or proving it. But, I'm assuming Nate Hackett has spoken to Aaron Rodgers at some point since he's been fired is what I would say. Like, I don't have knowledge of that, but I would assume that has happened. And like I said, like if Hackett really wasn't keen on coming back to coaching and then all of a sudden he decided he was going to take the job, like, the Jets, for all the reasons I mentioned, like they have some appeal to them, but he's probably not gonna be a head coach again. So like, what's the appeal of him coming to be the offensive coordinator here if he's not coming knowing that there's going to be a quality quarterback that he's coaching and that he can rehab his image? Because if he didn't get Aaron Rodgers and they don't get Derek Carr and you're stuck with Jimmy G, who's injured all the time, or like Tannehill and Zach Wilson or something, like you're risking your reputation getting even further burned. So he clearly cares about that if he didn't want to come back initially. So I just think there's a lot of smoke there, and a lot of times where there's smoke, there's fire, and there's a lot of similarity. It's actually kind of trippy, the similarities to when they got Brett Favre 15 years ago now. Brett Favre was 39. They traded Brett Favre because they had a young quarterback waiting in the wings, Aaron Rodgers, and if the Packers do that now, they're trading a 39-year-old Aaron Rodgers to the Jets in theory because they have a young quarterback waiting in the wings in Jordan Love.
Pretty good system.
The symmetry is pretty wild. The Packers, the one with Favre, that was even crazier because that happened like in August, like right before the season. And it worked out at the beginning. They went like 8-3 to start out, and then they lost like the rest of their games, and Eric Mangini was fired, and then Favre was gone. So, again, I'm sure we're going to talk about Rodgers a lot in the coming weeks, especially based on what just happened. But there is some risk. He's on the decline. Are you getting a 2-year commitment from him, or is he only saying I'm playing this year? And if that's the case, are you really going to trade like multiple firsts or whatever it takes? Like, there's a lot of factors here, but ultimately, I don't think Hackett takes this job unless Saleh convincingly told him, like, we believe we're going to get X quarterback, and X quarterback Aaron Rodgers might have been a big part of that discussion.
All right, let's dig into Hackett a little more beyond the Broncos fiasco, because I mean, that's not the job he's going to have with the Jets. We don't need the Jets have a head coach. They don't need him to do whatever he did in Denver to help cause that. But he does have a pretty long tenure as a, whether it's quarterbacks coach or offensive coordinator. I was texting with you guys because I was looking through and I had totally forgotten that he was actually the Syracuse offensive coordinator in 2011 and 2012. Those were the Ryan Nassib years for any Syracuse fans out there. And I will say, as far as development goes, Nassib was awful when he was early in his career, and he ended up having a great last couple of years, and he ended up being an NFL backup quarterback for a bit. So I guess he did a good job there. But when you look at the rest of his resume, Bill's offensive coordinator for 2 years, then he went to the Jags with Doug Marrone, quarterbacks coach for a year, offensive coordinator for a couple of years, and then to the Packers, where obviously he had the most success. 3 years with the Packers. 2 of those years, Aaron Rodgers wins MVP awards. I think the last year he was there, they had the highest scoring offense in the NFL. But other than Ryan Nassib, if you go through the quarterbacks, EJ Manuel and Kyle Orton in Buffalo, Blake Bortles, Jacksonville, and then Rodgers. Unless I'm missing something here, Zach, there isn't really a proof of development of quarterbacks. And it's something that Saleh talked about, right? Wanting to get a guy who could develop young quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. It's always hard with these things because I wasn't, I don't have all the, behind the scenes details of EJ Manuel and Blake Bortles and their work habits. So we'll say he did, get Blake Bortles playing pretty well. They went to the AFC Championship game that one year. He had over, I don't even know if he had 4,000 yards, but he had over 3,000. There's one year he had over 30
became a star
touchdowns.
on The Good Place.
Yeah, The Good Place. Maybe Hackett's the reason why he became such a big deal on there. But so yeah, I think he did a good job considering what Blake Bortles was, which was like a very mistake-prone quarterback who can make all the throws kind of thing. EJ Manuel, whose fault is it that he didn't develop? It's a fair question. It's kind of like the questions we're asking with Zach Wilson now. I mean, different situation, obviously. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there's not, you can only base it on what we know. And what we know is he, he had quarterbacks that on paper looked like bad quarterbacks, and you have to figure out if he was the reason or if they were the reason or if it was a combo of the two. And
I mean, none of those quarterbacks came in like as hotshot young. Like none of them were Zach Wilson, right?
Yeah.
Like EJ Manuel, none of those names.
Yeah, so exactly. I even remember when EJ Manuel was picked when it was like viewed as kind of a reach when the Bills picked him that early. But again, like I said, and I think Saleh has like alluded to this, and I think it's a fair point. Like, or maybe Saleh hasn't, but I think it's something that in talking to people around the team and stuff like that, it's hard to succeed as an offensive coordinator when you don't have good quarterback play, and you can attribute like the offensive coordinator to that bad quarterback play in a lot of ways, but like the list of quarterbacks you just mentioned, like there's no other than Rodgers, like I don't know who's going to succeed with EJ Manuel and Blake Bortles necessarily. I don't know who's going to succeed with Zach Wilson and Joe Flacco this last year. So that's all a factor, and ultimately I think they're basically admitting that they need to go and get a good enough quarterback, otherwise they're screwed. So that's going to be, now that we know who the offensive coordinator is, what it's going to look like. I think the offense is going to look not as different as maybe we originally thought, because he does run like a West Coast type offense. It might not be the exact same, but it's pretty similar concept. What he runs is my understanding. So the offense is going to be wildly different. So maybe that, helps somebody like Jimmy G if they do wind up getting him. But I do think they're going to aim high. I think they're going to aim for a Rodgers. They're going to aim for, I don't think Lamar is going to come available. You're going to aim for a Derek Carr. You can decide if you think that's aiming high or not. But they need a guy like that to come in. Otherwise, this whole experiment is going to fail and everybody's going to be out of a job next year. So,
yeah, that'll be rough for Hackett, out of a job, then out of another job. Let's take a quick break, but we have a lot more to get to here, talking about the new offensive coordinator of the New York Jets.
Hey guys, Valentine's Day is around the corner, and Roman wants to make sure that your Valentine's Day is extra special, because a strong sex life can deepen your feelings of intimacy with your partner and lead to increased happiness. Roman addresses a variety of sexual health needs for men. Roman offers genuine medication that helps achieve and maintain your sex goals. Treating low testosterone can help revive your sex drive. Roman has testosterone testing and treatment. So how does it work? First, complete an online visit detailing your symptoms and medical history. A U.S. licensed healthcare professional will review your information and make a personalized treatment recommendation. Roman will ship your treatment in discreet packaging with free 2-day shipping if prescribed. And better yet, with Roman, everything is online. There are no waiting rooms and there's no hassle. Roman sends everything right to your door. They'll do it with free shipping. And again, discreet packaging, so no one else around in the neighborhood knows what you're getting in the mail. To get ready, Roman ready for better sex this Valentine's Day, go to ro.co/athletic today to get 20% off your entire first order. Do it by February 8th for guaranteed shipping in time. That's ro.co/athletic.
All right. One thing Robert Saleh talked about today, besides these hires, is that there's still a plan for another hire, right? Another coach on the offensive side with experience to help with this whole thing. Any thoughts on the type, like a grouping of names, Zach, that would make sense in that? I mean, are we still talking about like Kubiaks of the world?
Well, I don't think Gary Kubiak specifically. It sounds like he's like pretty stuck in retirement, but Clint Kubiak was on Hackett's staff in Denver. I don't have any names in particular, but I was like looking through like some staffs that Nate Hackett was on in the past, and one name that I stumbled on that actually intrigued me was Todd Downing was the quarterbacks coach for the Bills in 2014 when he was the offensive coordinator there. Todd Downing was fired by the Titans as the offensive coordinator. They just hired the Titans offensive line coach, so I think you can make a direct connection there. I don't know if Downing's trying to be an offensive coordinator somewhere else or what, but yeah, Saleh seems pretty committed. He said he still plans to get a senior offensive assistant. He said he wants to structure it like he did initially with Greg Knapp before his unfortunate passing in that first year in 2021. So I think we'll find out who that's going to be in the coming weeks. But yeah, I imagine it'll be like a position like that usually goes to somebody that you've heard of. Like that's generally what happens. It goes to a guy who has a lot of experience, either as a former head coach, offensive coordinator, whatever it is, and maybe there's somebody I'm not thinking of that could be surprising that they'll bring on. But that'll be crucial. You're handing the keys to the offense to Nathaniel Hackett, and it didn't really go well when he had the keys to the offense in Denver this last year. I think that's undeniable. You can, say whatever you want about the situations, but, he did a poor job in like game management in the beginning of the season. That kind of went viral. That's why they brought in Jerry Rosburg. I think the Jets do have a good structure in terms of like the late game management stuff. They have Dan Smash, who I wrote about earlier in the year, and Saleh has been.
If you haven't read that article, check it out too.
Yeah, and Saleh has been good about clock management and like situational awareness, stuff like that. So I think that's a positive that you have that structure already in the building. But it'll be good to get a veteran coach in there to help Hackett, to help the offense, to help whoever this quarterback is they're going to have. And that's going to be one of the more outside of, all the stuff we've talked about, the quarterback, the O-line, who they find for that job is going to be pretty fascinating to me.
Do you think this move, or does this hiring, as opposed to hiring, somebody else that they were looking at, like, can we take anything from this about Zach Wilson and what this means kind of for Zach Wilson going forward? Obviously he's friends with Aaron Rodgers. So maybe if Aaron Rodgers is the guy and you have Zach learning from, a guy that he worships, like that's, maybe a good thing. I don't even know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but like, just what does this mean for Zach?
Yeah, I still think they're kind of in the same place with Zach. It's that they're willing to develop him behind the scenes if they keep him. If Rodgers is here as a mentor, I think Rodgers is his hero. So if anybody's going to get through to him, maybe Rodgers would. I think they're, like you kind of alluded to jokingly, like they're, Rodgers as somebody like guiding you. I don't know necessarily if he's the best one, but like in life, I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. I still don't get this. I don't get the sense that they view Zach as like they're part of their future. I think they're saying all the right things publicly. I don't necessarily, like, if I was putting money on it, I don't know that I would say they're going to trade him, but I also would not be surprised if they're willing to listen to offers for him. That would be dependent on them getting like once they have a quarterback in here, then you could start thinking about, okay, do we view Zach as his future replacement or not? And if not, then, maybe it's worth looking at what you can get for Zach in the market kind of thing. But there's a lot of factors, but ultimately I still think they're in the same place as Zach, that, they failed those first 2 years to get him becoming like a quality NFL quarterback. And at this point, if he becomes anything more than what we've seen so far, then it's kind of a bonus, but I don't think anybody's realistically expecting that to happen at this point.
Rodgers has said very nice things about him over the last couple of weeks, about how he thinks he has the ability to be a great quarterback for a long time in this league and stuff like that. But obviously you're gonna say nice things about somebody that you're friends with off the field. All right, let's talk about offensive line, because Keith Carter is the new offensive line, and he has his work cut out for him, because there's some work to be done here between the injuries and the players who could be out the door. Obviously, it's going to be a new look offensive line for the Jets in 2023. Carter comes from the Titans. When I first saw that, you think like, wow, the Titans and a dominant running attack. This seems good. But on the other hand, the Titans got rid of him after last season. So just what do you know at this point about Keith Carter, Zach?
Yeah. So he was with the Titans for 5 years, which is a pretty decent amount. I think probably since Mike Vrabel got there, I would imagine. Right. And their offensive line was really good the first few years. I think progressively you could see that the rankings went down. In my story that I published a little bit ago, actually, I went through each year and where they ranked in pressure rate allowed, like how much pressure they give up, like pass rush wise, and their successful play rate on rushes. So basically successful running plays. And so in 2018, they were 11th and 21st, 2019, 9th and 11th, 2020, 15th and 6th, 2021, 18th and 25th. And then last year, 30th and 28th. So you could see it kind of got worse in recent years. I don't really know. I need to dig more into like what the Titan situation was. I know they were pretty banged up, I believe, on the O-line. But ultimately, Saleh described it as philosophical differences is why they let him go. But Saleh like lit up talking about how excited he was to get Keith Carter in the building. I get the impression that there was a few other teams that were talking to him. So I think they're excited about that. They obviously needed a revamp what's going on there. I think the bigger issue, I don't think John Benton was a bad coach personally. He was dealt an impossible hand. I don't know. I can't say that he's a great coach. It's hard to say because you never really saw like a healthy offensive line. Like they dealt with a degree of injuries on the O-line that is nobody would be able to survive that. They had 6 starting tackles going IR. And at the end of the year, you basically had guys off the street that were starting. I think as of now, as I've alluded to many times, there are only 2 like guaranteed starters coming back next year, or AVT, and Lakin Tomlinson, and you don't really know what position ABT is even going to play right now. I don't think you can justifiably say Mekhi Becton is locked in as a starter. I don't think you could say Max Mitchell is. Dwayne Brown, he has to decide if he wants to play, or if Jets have to decide if they want to bring him back. George Fant, free agent, probably not coming back. Nate Herbig, I would guess not coming back. Connor McGovern maybe comes back at center, maybe not. But you have 3 spots you have to fill as of right now on the offensive line. And, so he's basically starting from scratch essentially. And I imagine there'll be a rookie in there, highly drafted rookie or something like that. So you have to really you're coming from a place where the O-line was as bad as can be at the end of last year. So you think it can't really get much worse, but he has his work cut out for him, to say the least. And Keith Carter and that offensive line is going to be the key to if this team can turn it around, because if you have that bad of an offensive line, I don't care if you have Aaron Rodgers back there. Aaron Rodgers is 39 years old. Derek Carr does not do well against pressure. Jimmy Garoppolo is injury prone. If these dudes are getting hit every play, like the quarterbacks were in the second half of the year, they are not going to make the playoffs next year. So Keith Carter is a very important hire. He has the resume. I think Taylor Lewan in particular, I saw there was some quotes where I don't think he was particularly fond of him. I don't know if everybody felt that way. That's another thing I need to dig into, but I think on paper that's a good hire. I don't know if they could have gotten somebody better with a better resume than he has. And you look at the Titans, the Jets want to be a team that dominates via the defense and running the ball, and they had some of the best running off. It helps to have Derrick Henry, obviously, but they had one of the best rushing offenses of the last 5 years. So he fits what they want.
Hall is great, right?
He fits what they want to do. Yeah, Breece Hall, you have the injury factor and all that stuff, but it's a good hire at the very least on paper, I would say.
And it does feel like you can look at the offensive line, if you put your green glasses on, I guess, and see a really good offensive line, right? Becton comes back and realizes his potential. Yeah. AVT comes back and gets back to being what he was. Tomlinson is a guy they spend money on and has a history of being good. Mitchell showed some, right? There's there's a world, and then you add a rookie into the mix that's a high draft pick, and suddenly you're like, oh, this could be a good offensive line, but then it could also be the opposite of that. So many variables. Yeah.
And I've talked about this. I think you don't need the offensive line to be the best in the league. You just need it to be a good offensive line. Right. I think you saw, what that looks like in that Bills game they won, where they kind of ran it down their throat at the end of the game, and they're not gonna be able to do that every game. But especially if your offensive line is good at run blocking, you can especially with the way that Jets want to operate, you can survive. And so if they could have some continuity, Mekhi Becton, on paper could be their best offensive lineman, just talent wise. I don't think there's a guy more talented in that building. And but there's always the health and the shape that he's in kind of situation with him, and AVT can be a star. So if you have 2 guys, playing up to their potential like that, you fill the rest out with some solid players, and you're in good shape. But there's so many questions that, you're banking on, okay, what position is AVT going to play? Is he healthy? Mekhi Becton, is he healthy? Max Mitchell, is he healthy? Who are they going to play at center? Who are they going to play at? Lakin Tomlinson, is he going to play better than he did in a bad first year? There's just so many what ifs right now that it's hard to envision it being a great offensive line this year. I mean, crazier things have happened. Teams have turned things around quickly. If they're just healthy for 16, 17 games and you feel pretty good about it, even 13, 14 games, if you're healthy for that much, they should be in better shape. But yeah, the offensive line now, other than quarterback, but it's tied together really. The offensive line is their biggest question they have positionally.
We were joking on text a little bit about starting, and maybe we'll do it, basically starting a gauge for Jets fans of how they're viewing this team right now. And I joked number 10 is we're headed to the Super Bowl. Number 1 is fire Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh yesterday, and all the things in between. So Marissa, with that said, I know you put a question in about how people are feeling in the chat. From what you're reading, and this is a small sample size, it's the Can't Wait viewers who are, our favorite of Jets fans.
Every Jets fan is watching right now, I believe.
But yeah, exactly. But on the 1 to 10
and they're all gonna have an opinion of what I say that the general consensus is.
True. But where would you say that they're sitting right now, 1 to 10?
I wouldn't say disappointment, but I wouldn't say total excitement over Hackett either.
I would say on Twitter, which is a bigger sample, and I like our listeners better than overall Twitter, I would say it was much darker than that. It was pretty negative on Twitter. So.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing is people are bypassing the Hackett and just focusing on Rodgers. Like, what
Yeah.
does this mean?
So I think there's some excitement for that, and there's some people who don't want that to happen also. So
yes,
right, there's that
yes.
too. Yeah, people that are like,
And it's like,
it's basically the Jets fan base is what we're saying. Where some people are
Yes.
happy, some are angry. So
Yeah, I think they're like, there's a lot of questions. Well, what would they have to give up for Rodgers? Is it worth giving up all of that kind of thing? When would he join the team? There's a lot of questions about free agents. Like, that's going to play a factor too. If you don't know who your quarterback's going to be, like, and top players are deciding between two teams. I mean, the money says one thing, but you want to know who's giving you the ball or who's controlling the offense kind of thing too. So I think there's skepticism, I would say. But I think the more comments that come in, the more it's focused on, well, what does this mean for quarterback? More so than opinions on Hackett and what kind of offense he's going to run. I don't think I saw a single comment about the kind of offense. About that. Yeah, exactly. It's like, does this mean that they're getting Rodgers? So
Rodgers and what he would cost for a trade is fascinating to me, because like you look at the Russell Wilson deal, to me, like in a way, like broke quarterback trades, right? Like they gave up so much. Russell Wilson,
and they're stuck with him. Like they have no options.
He was awful, and obviously it's Nathaniel Hackett which ties this all together. But like, it's different because Rodgers obviously isn't in his prime like people thought Russell Wilson was. He's older. He's kind of in a year-to-year situation here, but still, like, they gave up so much that you still feel like it's multiple first rounders, maybe.
Yeah,
it's just a lot to give up for 1 year of a quarterback.
Yeah, I think if you look at what these trades have been, the Rodgers one is interesting just because of all the contract stuff, and I don't know, Packers maybe don't have as much leverage as they have in past years, but they do have his rights without a no trade clause. So I will say I was looking at the comments from my story from earlier. I think this comment like sums up Jets fans pretty well. This person didn't put a name on it attached to it, but he said, I tried writing a big, long philosophical piece with sarcasm and insight using advanced metrics and data analysis, but who cares? The Jets suck.
I mean,
yep, that sums it
there
up.
Was like I said, when they fired LaFleur, nobody was going to be happy with who they hired, no matter who it was. It was the grass wasn't always greener. So I think
but people love the hiring of LaFleur and see how that went. So let's just see what happens, right?
Yeah,
I think that's the best way is to. It happens in the NFL all the time. You have coaches that they're in the wrong situation and things go off the rails terrible, and then they get a second chance, they get redemption. I mean, it happens all the time. So we'll see what happens. Any final thoughts, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, now the next step is going to be, I'm curious to see how quickly this QB thing gets wrapped up. I imagine they would like to get it done sooner than later, but you don't really have a choice in some degrees. And then the other thing is...
So just a reminder of what picks the Jets have.
They have all their picks, I believe, this year, except for the one they traded for James Robinson, which was a 6th-round pick.
But no extras this year.
Yeah, no extras, and they have their... That's the thing. I need to look at the teams that would like consider them. There was a report that they would only trade Rodgers to the AFC, which probably would help the Jets. I don't know if that's true or not. I think you're going to take the best package unless it's in the NFC North, probably.
You're not winning the Super Bowl with Jordan Love next year, so why not just take the best package, right? That doesn't make any sense.
I mean, and then the flip side of this is if the Packers do decide that they want to keep Rodgers or that Rodgers wants to stay, at that point you're probably going to trade Love because he's already been in the league 3 years now. This would be his. I can't remember what year he got drafted.
I think they have to. Don't they have to make a decision on his contract?
On his 5th-year option,
like 4 games.
And I mean, I don't know what the value is on him because nobody's really seen him play. So that's a very fascinating part of it. And just before we go, I will say I'd keep an eye on the structure of the staff because I think they're going to bring back some of the guys that are already on the staff, but Hackett's going to have the ability to if there's a spot that he wants to change, I think there's going to be some guys, whether that's quarterback's coach or whatever that if he would like to make a change there, I think Saleh is comfortable letting him do that. There's some spots I don't think Saleh wants to change anything on the offensive staff, but I think you're going to see Hackett bring in some of his own guys as well, which is something to watch over the next few weeks.
All right. And when stuff happens, we'll be here. We are planning to not do an episode next week, but we'll see.
Who knows?
We just ensure that they're going to trade for a quarterback next week, I think.
Yeah, next week, probably on Wednesday.
It's probably going to be the one PTO day I took next
week. What day are you taking?
Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday.
So keep an eye out for Wednesday.
Yeah, keep an eye out for news on Wednesday.
Yeah.
All right. Well, when it happens, we'll have it, and we'll be here throughout the off season, obviously. Kind of a slower cadence, but we'll keep coming at you with new podcasts. If you want to join The Athletic, you can do that right now. Go to theathletic.com/can't wait. $1.99 a month for a year. $1.99 a month for a year. Read all of Zach's great stuff, all the other great stuff. Baseball's coming up soon, all that content. So great stuff going on at The Athletic, and we will talk to everybody again soon.